The night was not silent. The alien forest groaned under the weight of a storm. Lightning cracked the sky in jagged lines, and thunder rolled like drums of war. The trees, tall and sharp, bent under the heavy wind, their glowing leaves scattering. Sparks of light. In the middle of this chaos, a human explorer sat near his small fire, his shelter made from steel sheets and canvas. He was tired, his body worn from weeks of traveling across unknown lands. He had fought beasts, crossed rivers, and climbed mountains, but tonight he only wanted rest. The fire flickered against his rough face, shadows dancing across his scarred hands. He thought the storm was the only thing he would face tonight, but he was wrong. Through the howling wind, he heard a faint cry. At first, he thought it was only the wind twisting into voices, but then he heard it again, clearer this time, small, desperate, and trembling. It was the voice of a child. He stood, his hand on the knife at his belt, his eyes scanning the darkness. The cry grew louder, closer, until a small figure stumbled out of the trees. Her skin shimmered faintly under the stormlight, marked with alien patterns. Her large eyes glowed with tears, her tiny frame shaking in the cold rain. She looked up at him, her voice breaking. "Please, human, help. My mom is trapped in the Sky Hunter's nest." The words hit him harder than thunder. The Sky Hunters, he knew the name. Every traveler knew the name. They were not simple birds. They were monsters of the sky, wings wide enough to cover a village, claws sharp enough to cut through steel. They hunted in the storms, using lightning as cover. Many warriors had tried to fight them. None returned. The human stared at the girl, rain dripping down his face. He could have ignored her, closed his shelter, and waited for morning. But her trembling body, her pleading eyes, would not let him. He bent down, his voice low. "Where is she?" The girl pointed upward, beyond the cliffs, high into the storm-filled sky. There, faint against the lightning, he saw it, a massive shape, a nest built into the rocks, glowing faintly with strange fire. Even from this distance, he could feel the danger. The Sky Hunter took her. The girl whispered. She screamed for me to run, but I could not leave her. "Please, human, you must help." Her voice cracked, and she fell to her knees, clutching the wet soil. The human felt something stir inside him. He remembered another time, another place, when he too had called for help, and no one came. He reached down and lifted the girl gently to her feet. His hand was steady, his eyes firm. "Stay close to me," he said. "I will see what I can do." The girl nodded, wiping her tears, but fear still trembled in her breath. They walked to the edge of the cliff, the storm slashing against their faces. Far above, a screech echoed, sharp enough to shake the ground. The girl gasped, clutching his arm. "That is it, the Sky Hunter," she whispered. The human narrowed his eyes. He saw the massive wings spread against the lightning, circling its nest like a shadow made of bone and storm. It was guarding the mother, waiting to feed its young. His jaw tightened. The villagers back in the valley had spoken of this creature. They said no one could touch it. No one could climb to its nest and live. But the girl's hand tightened around his arm, refusing to let him go. Her tears mixed with the rain. "Please," she begged again, her voice nearly breaking. "You are all I have left." The human said nothing. His silence was heavier than the storm, but in his eyes, a fire burned brighter than the lightning above. He looked at the cliff, at the nest, at the monster, and then back at the child. This was not his fight, not his world, not his war, but something deep inside him would not allow him to walk away. He placed his hand on the girl's shoulder, steady and strong. "You will not be alone," he said. The wind screamed, the thunder cracked, and the Sky Hunter shrieked again. The human stared at the monster's nest, knowing the path ahead was death. Yet he also knew one truth: if he turned away, the child would never forgive him, and neither would he forgive himself. So, beneath the storm and the shadow of the Sky Hunter, the decision was made. The girl's hope rested in his hands. The night was no longer silent. It was the beginning of a battle above the clouds. And it all started with the cry for help. The storm did not rest. The forest roared as if the world itself was warning them to turn back. The human stood at the cliff's edge, his eyes locked on the glowing nest above. The alien girl clung to his arm, her tiny hands shaking but refusing to let go. Her tears mixed with the rain, her voice weak yet determined. "You are the only one who will listen," she whispered. "No one else dares to help." Her words cut deeper than the thunder, sharper than the lightning that split the sky. The human knew. What she said was true. The villagers feared the sky hunters more than they feared death itself. Earlier that evening, before the storm, he had walked through their camp. He had seen the way they whispered when he passed, the way they lowered their eyes. They had told stories around their fires about broken warriors, about hunters who never returned. Their voices carried fear, the kind that chained people to silence. Now, standing in the rain, the human remembered their warnings. "Do not go near the cliffs," they had said. "The sky hunters will tear you apart. Let the weak be taken, or more will die," they had whispered. He had not argued then, but his silence was not agreement. The girl's eyes shone like glass under the stormlight. She was young, far too young to be burdened with such loss. But she did not back away. She stood against a storm with all her fear, and that made him pause. The human's hand went to his knife, the only weapon he carried besides his courage. It was small, compared to the monster waiting above. He knew it would not be enough. He knew he could die. Still, the girl's grip on his arm tightened, and her voice rose again. "They say humans are strong," she whispered, "stronger than fear." Her words trembled, but inside them burned hope. The human did not answer at once. He turned his eyes to the cliff. The climb was long, slick with rain, broken by sharp stones and dangerous shadows. One slip, one wrong step, and death would claim him before he even saw the beast. He thought of the times he had fought before, the scars on his hands, the blood he had shed. But those were battles of his choice. This one was not his fight, and yet, something inside him would not let him walk away. The girl pressed her forehead against his arm. "She told me to run," she said, "but I cannot leave her." Her voice cracked, and she sobbed into the rain. The human felt the weight of her sorrow, and with it, the weight of his choice. He could tell her no. He could push her away. He could say, "It is not my problem," and return to his fire. But the look in her eyes told him what that answer would mean. It would mean she had begged in vain. It would mean hope had died with her words. He clenched his fists, his silence longer than the storm's roar. Finally, he knelt, lowering himself to her level. "You know the risk," he said slowly, his voice steady like iron. "If I climb, I may not return." The girl shook her head, rain running down her face. "Then I will wait until I see you return," she said, her voice stronger now. The human studied her for a long moment. Her courage was fragile, but it was still courage. He rose, his shadow stretching tall against the stormlight, his heart heavy, yet unshaken. "I will go," he said, and those 3 words cut through the storm like a blade. The girl gasped, relief flooding her face. From behind, faint voices carried. Through the storm, the villagers had followed, standing at a distance, their eyes wide. They shook their heads. Some turned away. One old man shouted, "No human, no warrior, no god can face the sky hunter and live." The human turned his head, his voice cold and sharp. "Then watch and see," he answered. The villagers fell silent. Fear chained their tongues. The girl clutched his cloak, her eyes wide with faith. The climb would begin at dawn, when the storm's heart weakened, but the human did not rest. He stood awake beside the fire, sharpening his blade, studying the cliff, listening to the endless cry of the sky hunter above. The girl lay close by, trembling but refusing to sleep. Every so often, she whispered into the night, she will live because of you." Her voice was small, but it burned into his heart, and in the silence between thunder, he felt the weight of her trust. This was no longer a question of survival. It was a choice made, a path set, a fire lit in the storm. The human would climb. He would face the sky hunter, and whether he lived or died, he would not turn his back on her cry. The storm raged on, but his decision stood firm. Tomorrow, the reluctant choice would become a battle above the clouds. The sky was still gray when the human stood at the base of the cliff. Rain had slowed, but mist still rolled across the rocks like creeping breath. The world above remained hidden behind thick clouds and cries of wind, but he could feel it, that weight in the air. The waiting predator, far above. The alien girl stood behind him, holding a piece of cloth in her hand. "This belonged to my mom," she said, placing it in his palm. The cloth was torn and blood-stained, but it still smelled faintly of flowers. He nodded once, tucking it into his jacket, close to his heart. The climb was steep, a jagged wall of black rock and glowing moss. He tested the first few grips with care, his hands steady but his eyes always moving. One wrong move would send him falling into the misty valley below. But he climbed anyway, without hesitation. Below, the girl watched with wide eyes, her lips moving in silent prayer. The cliff moaned in the wind, stones loose from centuries of storms. A sudden gust nearly threw him back, but he gripped tighter. His fingers bled against the sharp edges. But he climbed higher. Halfway up, he paused on a narrow ledge. He looked down, but the ground was lost in mist. He looked up, and saw shadows flying in circles above the nest. The sky hunter was there waiting, watching, maybe even listening. He took a breath, wiped the blood from his hands, and continued. Strange vines grew here, blue and pulsing softly like veins. One of them wrapped around his wrist suddenly. Squeezing tight, he yanked his arm free, but the bite left a black mark on his skin. The cliff was not just rock, it was alive in some way. He passed glowing eggs, nestled in cracks, tiny eyes staring at him from within. He didn't stop, didn't ask what they were. The only thing that mattered was the nest, and the mother inside it. Hours passed. The wind grew stronger as he neared the top. He found shelter under a jutting stone to catch his breath. The nest was close now. Just a short climb left, but that part was the most dangerous. It was vertical, smooth, with almost no handholds. The human stared at it, then pulled rope from his pack. He wrapped it around his waist, tied knots, checked it twice. He wasn't climbing for glory. He was climbing for someone's mother, and failure was not an option. He drove spikes into the rock, testing each one with a heavy tug. With slow, careful steps, he moved higher, the rope biting into his back, and then, suddenly, a shadow passed over him. He froze, pressed against the cliff, not daring to breathe. The sky hunter flew by, its wings cutting the wind like blades. Its cry echoed so loud that the mountains seemed to shake. The human waited, every muscle tense, until the beast vanished into the clouds again. Only then did he move again, faster now, but more careful than ever. At last, he reached the edge of the nest. It was huge, made of bones and metal scraps, glowing softly in the stormlight. He climbed over the edge and dropped into it silently. The air smelled of blood, feathers, and something ancient. In the center of the nest, wrapped in vines and bones, was the alien mother. Her eyes opened slowly, weak and wide with shock. She whispered, You're not one of us. Why did you come?" He knelt beside her, cutting the bindings from her arms. "Your daughter sent me," he said quietly. "She's waiting below." Tears filled the woman's eyes, but her lips trembled in fear. "It will return," she warned. "It always returns to feed." The human helped her sit up, wrapping her with a cloth. Suddenly, the wind shifted, the nest trembled. A deafening screech shattered the air, and a shadow fell over them. The sky hunter had returned, its eyes glowing like red fire. The human stood between the beast and the mother. He drew his blade, knowing it was small, knowing it might not be enough. The creature landed on the edge of the nest, its wings folding like curtains of bone, its beak opened wide, screeching in fury. The human did not move, his heart racing, but his feet firm. He turned to the alien mother, his voice calm despite the fear. "When I say run, you climb down, follow the rope." She tried to argue, but he shook his head. "I didn't climb this high to let you die now." The sky hunter lunged, and the cliff-top battle began. But that was for the next moment, the next breath. For now, he stood tall, blade in hand. A stranger from another world, climbing not for gold or fame, but for a child's hope and a mother's life. The sky hunter landed with a crash that shook the entire nest. Its wings stretched wide, shadowing everything in cold darkness. Its eyes, red and burning, focused on the human with rage and hunger. It screeched so loud that the bones in the nest rattled, and even the air seemed to shake. The alien mother clutched the side of the nest, her strength barely enough to hold herself upright. The human stepped forward, his blade in his hand. The creature hissed, stepping closer, its clawed feet cracking the bones underfoot. The nest wasn't just a prison, it was also a graveyard. The sky hunter's body shimmered with strange armor-like feathers, each one sharp and black. It moved with grace, but also with terrifying weight. This was no simple beast. This was a predator born to rule the sky, and now it stood inches away from the human. The alien mother cried out, "You must leave. It will kill you." But the human did not move. His hand tightened on the knife, and his eyes locked with the beast's. "I didn't climb to die," he said. "I climbed to free you." The sky hunter lunged forward, its beak snapping. The human rolled aside just in time, its strike slicing through empty air. He slashed upward with the blade, cutting across the creature's leg. It screeched again, furious, spinning with deadly speed. The battle was chaos. Lightning flashed. Around them, rain fell again, soaking the nest, making the surface slick and dangerous. The human moved quickly, always one step from death. But the sky hunter was faster, stronger, and unafraid. The creature slammed its wing into the human, knocking him to the edge of the nest. He slipped, grabbing a thick vine just in time to stop his fall. Below him was nothing but mist and death. He climbed back up, gasping, soaked in rain and blood. The alien mother crawled toward him, weak but reaching. "You can't beat it," she whispered. "Please, save yourself." He looked at her, his chest rising and falling like thunder. "I've seen worse," he said with a small, tired smile. He turned to face the beast again, now circling him, its wings opened wide, feathers sharp as swords. The human noticed something. One of the beast's wings was torn. His blade from earlier had wounded it. The sky hunter could not fly well now. That gave him an idea. He didn't need to kill it, just stop it from fighting. He circled toward the beast, letting it strike again. This time, he dodged and threw his rope forward. The rope wrapped around the sky hunter's injured wing. Before it could react, the human pulled hard. The creature screeched and thrashed, but the rope held. He used the moment to drive his blade into the nest beneath its foot. The weakened platform cracked and gave way. The sky hunter stumbled, half its body hanging off the edge. It roared, struggling to rise, but the rope, the wound, and the broken nest slowed it down. The human ran to the alien mother and pulled her to her feet. "We're leaving now," he said, not waiting for her answer. He helped her to the edge, tying the rope around her waist. "You first. Slide down, slow." She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "I can't leave you," she whispered. "You must," he said. "Your daughter is waiting." That name gave her strength, and she nodded. She began her slow descent down the rope. The sky hunter shrieked one last time and tried to rise. The human threw rocks and bones at it, buying time. He shouted and roared louder than the wind. Finally, the beast lost its grip and fell backward with a terrible cry. It dropped into the clouds, wings flapping wildly. Vanishing into the mist below, the human didn't wait. He tied the rope to a sturdy beam and started his own climb down. Each step burned, his muscles screaming. Below, the alien girl looked up and saw her mother climbing down. "Mom!" she screamed, running toward the base of the cliff. Her mother landed on her knees and opened her arms. The girl jumped into them, both crying without words. When the human reached the ground, he fell to one knee. Exhausted, the girl ran to him, her small hands touching his bleeding arm. "You brought her back," she whispered. "You saved her." The alien mother limped to him, her voice shaking. "I do not know your name, human," she said softly, "but I owe you everything." He looked at both of them, tired but alive. "No one should scream for help and be ignored," he said. Then he smiled, even through the pain. Above them, the sky began to clear. The storm was ending, but a new bond had just begun. They thought it was over. The girl hugged her mother tightly, tears rolling down her cheeks as her fingers trembled with joy. The human leaned against a tree, rain still dripping from his clothes, every muscle in his body screaming for rest. But the wind changed again, colder, sharper, and heavy with danger. The birds in the forest went silent. Even the storm clouds above stopped moving, as if holding their breath. The human looked up, eyes narrowing, instincts warning him before his mind could understand. And then he heard it, a deep, terrible roar. Split the sky like thunder given a voice. The sky hunter had not died. It rose from the mist below the cliffs, wings torn, body bleeding, but rage burning hotter than ever. It had followed them down, hunted them through the clouds. The alien girl gasped, holding on to her mother. The wounded sky hunter crashed into the trees, its massive wings smashing branches and stones like toys. It let out a sound that made even the ground tremble. The human stood tall again, though his legs threatened to collapse. He stepped in front of the two aliens, raising his blade once more. The creature's feathers dripped with blood, but its eyes still burned with fire. One wing hung at a strange angle, broken and weak, but the other spread wide, casting a shadow over the forest floor. "It won't stop," the alien mother whispered, holding her daughter tightly. "Not until we are all dead." The human said nothing, but took a step forward. He had no energy left, no backup, no weapons besides a half-broken blade. But he had made a promise, and he would not let death break it. The sky hunter lunged again, its claws crashing into the earth. The human rolled aside, barely escaping. The beast roared and turned, its beak snapping toward him. He struck with the blade, cutting along its face. Blood sprayed, but the beast did not stop. It slammed into him with its shoulder, throwing him through a tree trunk. He landed hard, pain shooting through his ribs. He could not breathe for a second, but he forced himself up again. The alien girl screamed, "Please don't die, human." The sky hunter charged once more. This time the human ducked low and stabbed into its leg. The creature roared in pain and kicked him aside. He hit the ground, coughing, his blade lost somewhere in the grass. The sky hunter loomed over him now, chest rising, breath like smoke. It raised its claw, ready to end him. But something unexpected happened. The alien girl ran forward, placing herself between the monster and the human. Tears in her eyes, hands held up, she cried, "Stop. He saved my mom. He saved me. You don't need to do this." The sky hunter blinked, confused for a heartbeat. It lowered its claws slightly, staring at the tiny girl who stood without fear. The mother pulled herself up and limped to her daughter's side. "We are not prey," she said firmly. "We are not yours to break. Together." They stood like a wall between the human and the beast. The human crawled to his feet behind them. He picked up a sharp branch and moved slowly. This time, not to fight but to end it. He spotted the wound near the beast's neck, where the feathers were thin. With a cry of pure effort, he leaped forward and plunged a sharp branch deep into that spot. The sky hunter howled in agony, flailing wildly. It stumbled back, wings crashing against trees. The creature spun, flapping hard, and took to the sky in panic. It rose into the clouds, blood trailing behind. Its cries faded into the distance until silence returned. The forest stood still once more, watching the human fall to his knees, exhausted, broken, but alive. The alien girl ran to him, grabbing his hand. "You did it," she whispered. "You made it go away." The mother knelt beside him, touching his shoulder. "No warrior I have ever seen would face the sky hunter like that." The human smiled weakly, blood on his lips. "I'm not a warrior," he said. "I'm just someone who listens when others beg for help." They helped him stand, holding him on both sides. The storm had passed, but something greater had been born. Respect, gratitude, and a strange bond no one could name. Together, they walked slowly through the forest, leaving the battlefield behind, but deep in the trees. Others watched from the shadows, aliens who once feared the sky hunter. They had seen it all, and now, they whispered a new name through the woods. Skybreaker, they called him. The human who fought death. The human who stood when all others would run. The human who climbed above the clouds and won. The battle was over, but the danger was not gone. Smoke drifted through the trees, rising from the wounded nest high above the cliffs. Where the sky hunter had fallen, fire now spread. It danced across dry branches, leaping from rock to root like a hungry beast. The human stumbled as he walked, his wounds aching with every step. The alien girl held his hand tightly, refusing to leave his side. Her mother supported him from the other side, her limp slowing them all, but none of them wanted to stop. Behind them, the forest glowed orange and red. The wind carried sparks across the treetops, setting fire to everything. In their path, creatures of the forest ran past them, beasts, things with too many legs and eyes, all fleeing from the flames. "We have to move faster," the human said through gritted teeth. His voice was low, but steady. The girl looked up at him, tears in her eyes again. "But you're hurt," she said. "You can't walk like this." "I don't need to walk," he muttered, pulling something from his side pouch. It was a small injector, a pain blocker, meant for emergencies only. He pressed it to his neck, flinching as the medicine surged through his body. The pain dulled, not gone, but far enough for him to stand straight again. He picked the girl up with one arm and looked at her mother. "Stay close," he said. "The fire moves faster than we do." The mother nodded, her eyes focused, her body still trembling. But she followed him without hesitation. They ran through twisted paths and sharp roots. The smoke grew thicker, stinging their eyes and filling their lungs. The girl buried her face in his chest, coughing softly. The mother stumbled often but kept going, never asking for help. Ahead, a ridge appeared, high and narrow. "We need to get over that," the human said, pointing to the hill. "It's the only way out of the valley." The fire was close now, the heat pressing against their backs like invisible hands. He climbed first, using his one free arm. The mother followed, slipping but catching herself on low stones. The ground behind them cracked with fire, trees snapping from the heat. Every second counted. At the top of the ridge, the human looked back. The valley was covered in smoke now, and the nest where it all began had collapsed in flames. Ash filled the sky, falling like dark snow. He turned his eyes forward, hoping the other side would be safer. But what they found was worse. A swamp stretched before them, thick with fog and strange shapes under the surface. The girl shivered in his arms. "I don't like this place," she whispered. "We don't have a choice," the mother said, her voice firm for the first time. The human nodded. "Let's go." They stepped into the water slowly. It was cold, and strange vines brushed against their legs. Halfway through, something moved under the surface. A shape, fast and long, circled them like a silent shadow. The girl held tighter, her eyes wide with fear. The human reached for his blade, only to remember it was gone. The shadow rose, a giant serpent, glowing faintly in the mist. It hissed, eyes locking on to the smallest one, the girl. But before it could strike, the alien mother did something unexpected. She screamed, a high sound, sharp and musical. The serpent froze, confused. She stepped forward, hands raised, speaking in a language the human did not understand. The serpent stared for a moment, then slowly sank back beneath the water. "What did you say?" the human asked. "I told it, we're not food," she replied calmly. He raised an eyebrow. "That works." "Sometimes," she answered, though her knees were shaking. They reached the far side of the swamp, just as the fire reached the ridge behind them. They collapsed onto dry ground, coughing, crying, and gasping for air, but they were alive. The girl hugged her mother again, both of them covered in ash. The human sat beside them, wiping blood from his forehead. "You saved us again," the mother said quietly. He shook his head. "No, this time, you saved me." They sat in silence as the forest burned behind them. The sky above was dark with smoke, but the stars had begun to peek through. It was the first time in days that they saw the sky clearly, and for a brief moment, it felt like peace. Then the girl spoke, soft and sleepy. "Do you think the sky hunter will return?" The human looked at the flames in the distance. "If it does," he said, "we'll be ready." He lay back, staring at the stars. They had escaped death by fire and fang. But their journey wasn't over yet. Something was waiting ahead, something unknown, and maybe worse. But tonight, they had one. Tonight, the fire didn't take them, and tomorrow, they would rise again, together. The smoke still hung in the air when morning came. Golden light spilled through the treetops, soft and warm. The fires had burned out, leaving only blackened trees and quiet ash, but where destruction had passed, silence returned like a blessing. The human opened his eyes slowly. His body ached, his wounds stiff, but he was alive. Beside him, the alien girl slept peacefully, her head resting on her mother's lap. The mother watched the sunrise with tired eyes, her arms wrapped around her daughter like armor. He sat up, groaning quietly. The mother looked at him, her voice soft. "You should rest more." He shook his head slowly. "There's no time." They had escaped the sky hunter. They had survived fire, swamp, and fear, but they were still deep in the wild lands, far from any village. And the human knew their journey wasn't over yet. "I made a promise," he said, looking at the girl. "I told her I'd bring her mother back. Not just rescue her, but take her home." The mother blinked slowly, emotion swelling in her eyes. "No one has ever done this for us," she whispered, "not even our own people." He nodded, standing with effort. His clothes were torn, his blade was gone, and his hands still trembled, but his steps were firm. He would not leave their side until they were safe. They moved slowly that morning, through ruined forest and broken paths. The girl walked between them, one hand holding her mother's, the other gripping the human's fingers. She said little, but her eyes sparkled every time she looked up at him. She smiled as if she already knew they were heading home. By afternoon, they reached the edge of the valley. The sky was clear now, blue and wide, and in the distance, they saw smoke not from fire, but from chimneys. "The village," the girl gasped, her voice trembling. "That's it. That's home." The human smiled faintly, but the mother's face changed. Her smile faded into worry. "They may not accept me," she said quietly. "They abandoned me when I was taken. They feared the sky hunter." The human's jaw tightened. "Then I'll speak for you," he said. "They will listen." They entered the village slowly. People stopped what they were doing, eyes wide, mouths open. Children ran to their mothers. Elders whispered and pointed. No one moved forward, not at first. Then the old chief stepped out, his robe dragging across the dust. He looked at the mother, then at the human. "You came back," he said, disbelief in every word. "And you brought her. She never gave up." The human replied, nodding toward the girl. "She begged me, and I listened." The chief looked down at the girl, who stepped forward bravely. "She saved me," the girl said, pointing at the human. "He fought the sky hunter." Gasps moved through the crowd like wind. "No one has ever survived one." Someone whispered, "He climbed the cliff." Said another, "He brought her back." Said a third. The chief stepped closer, facing the human now. "You were not born of our people, but today, you acted like one of our greatest." The human shook his head. I didn't do it to be a hero, he said. I did it because no one else would. The mother lowered her head, tears falling down her cheeks. You kept your promise, she whispered. You brought me back to my daughter. The human looked at the girl, who now held both his hands. You were brave, he told her. You never stopped believing. The villagers came forward. Slowly at first, they embraced the mother, knelt before the girl, and bowed to the human. They lit fires of welcome, gave food and water, and they began to sing. That night, the stars returned to the sky, not hidden by smoke, not shadowed by wings. The fire crackled, but this time it was gentle, a sign of warmth, not destruction. The girl sat beside the human, her head resting on his arm. You're not leaving, right? She asked sleepily. He looked at the sky, then down at her small hand holding his again. Not yet, he said. Maybe not for a long time. The mother joined them, her voice soft. You have a place here, if you want it. He didn't answer with words. He just nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the stars. For once, there was no danger, no fear, no fire, just peace, just a promise that had been kept, and a new chapter ready to begin. The legend of the Sky Hunter would live on, but so would the story of the human who answered a child's cry, and the girl who never gave up. Together, they rewrote what it meant to be brave.